Okay, for this exercise, it seems like it's going to be super complicated, but don't get too worried about it. This is an optical illusion from some optical illusion coloring book page. What you're going to be doing is creating the illusion that this is going back into space. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. That was too close. Okay, so there we go. So this segment right here is back farther, and it's also pinched, so it's compressing in, and it's also being pushed back. The wider the stripe is, the closer it is to you. So the stripes are swooping towards you right here, just like a road. If this was a road and it was coming towards you, this would be where you were, right here. Okay, so with tonal progression, we can create the illusion that it is going into space, even more than it kind of looks already without color. So we're going to start first by understanding what stripes are which, because we're going to actually, this is a colored pencil. This is my my copy paper, it comes with my printer paper, and when I printed it out, I traced this onto my nice watercolor paper. But then I had this copy anyway, and I wanted to try to figure out if I can separate these stripes, and in fact that they are separated in here. So what I did is I just took a light colored pencil and I followed the where they were going. I just sort of started here and went every other stripe, doot, 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 and then it kind of connected here. What you're going to be doing is using tonal progression to create dimension in space even further than what this is doing. So as an example, this is kind of what you're going to get to at some point. It's going to look like this, where there are lighter values of the color in the progression here, because that's closest to you, and then it'll get darker as it goes back in this kind of pinched area. The reason why these look yellow right now is I was kind of doing the same thing as I was doing here, just with the lightest value of my stripes. So we're going to actually do that right now to figure out what stripes are which. Because these stripes here, all of these stripes are going to be the same tonal progression. Hopefully you'll have enough paint. Don't run out of your paint. That's the important thing. So choose a couple colors for your progression for this that you're not going to run out of. All right. So what I need to do is I just need to label with paint now. I have my 617, that was my yellow green, and my 508, that was my Prussian blue, my 508. And don't forget that gouache you can reuse. If you were to put plastic wrap on top of your paint and save it for next time, it wouldn't dry up and it'd be fine. Or you can hydrate it again. It just takes a little bit of time. That's the good thing about gouache, is if you have leftover paint, it's not wasted like acrylic. If you have leftover paint and it dries, it's not wasted. So I'm going to do this just the same thing as I did with a colored pencil. Just fill in every other. I'll start going this way, and then once I get to this stripe, I'll just take it all the way around. And then I'll move over to this stripe, and I'll take it all the way around. All the way around. All the way around. And once I do these ones here, then I'll understand where those go coming out the other side. Or I could just go and do these, just do these little pieces of them, and then go this way, and they should match up. If they don't, it's okay, because if you choose the lighter value and it messed up, your paint's going to, no matter what, it's going to go on top of, your color can go on top of this. This is just so I don't go buggy my eyes looking at this, trying to figure it out. This is just kind of laying it out for me right now. Your paint can be super watery at this point. This is just filling in the space. So ignore all the other rules that we've been talking about with gouache by making sure it's not too watery. This is just a mark. Make your mark. So now that I went this way, now I'm going to take this stripe and go around so I know where this ends up. And then I'm going to go back to this one, from here to this one, next one over. You don't have to be super neat, just as long as you're kind of staying inside that line. So this one swooped down and now it's wrapping around. So I know that's correct, because it also connects to this one. Okay. It's going behind the little pinch. It's going behind the pinch and coming out on the other side. If you make at least 1, 2, 3, 4 values in between your prismatic colors, so you've got your pure colors here. Mine are yellow green, 617, and 508 Prussian blue. And then I mixed 4 different values in the progression from light to dark, just so I will be able to get those in between these and this and this. As I'm mixing on the paper, I will be able to get the other values in the progression. But I just wanted some source material to start with. You're going to see the stripes in this progression, in this optical illusion. You're going to see them transition just like you see them transition in the progression, from the lightest yellow green to getting darker and darker and darker and darker and darker till blue. Okay, you're going to see that happening, and that's the point. That's the point of this exercise. So I'm going to start by blending at the closest points to me as the viewer. As we said, the pinch that happens back here, if this was like some weird crazy room, if we're looking into the room, and back there halfway into the room there's this column, right? And then behind the column there's extra space, like almost as if you could walk behind that column, right? So I know that this is a little bit closer to me than behind the column, but it's been pushed back because the width of these stripes is a lot less than the width of these stripes. So that's why these, and even these curves right here, these are closer to you. Okay, so we're going to start with those. Those are already starting out as yellow-green, and I'm going to start blending them, progressing them down, getting darker and darker as it goes in. Your darkest areas are going to be behind the column. So my darkest value, which is the Prussian blue, I will reserve. I will only, and this is a mistake. See, this is my first one. It's okay if you mess up. That's just happens to everybody. This is kind of planned. First of all, I did this without figuring out which stripes go where, so I ended up painting, and then I went back here and they didn't line up, and I was super confused. So then it made more sense to me to just sort of do them in the lightest value for the first progression, first stripes, every other stripe. Made more sense to just paint them right now, so it's not confusing while you're trying to do it without doing that. So you got to plan out things and try them. So that's what I did. But you can see that the stripe is lighter here, and then it gets progressively darker as it goes back. This, again, this area behind this column, that's going to be the darkest area. So the stripes in this part of the column here, those are not going to have the darkest value, because if they did, then it would negate the whole point of making it look like this column is in front of these stripes. So I'm going to start to do what I started to do on this first attempt, is to have the progression move slowly from light to dark. Again, you don't want your paint to be watery for this part. If it's watery, it defeats the whole purpose of doing this, okay? So just a few drops of water. I'm taking some of the source paint and I'm moving it over here. Or I could just put enough water in here to make it flow. It doesn't really matter. I might just work on a couple stripes at once. I'm not going to keep going around because it's going to dry too quickly on me. So I'll do 2. After I lay that value down, I'll go back to the original, the yellow-green, the pure yellow-green that comes out of the tubes. And I'll start blending that together. I do need to kind of wash my brush in between so that I don't muddy up things with too much whatever's been mixing on my brush from mixing values together. I'm just going to add water to this yellow-green that came out of the tube, just so it all kind of flows nicely. This is going to look darker than what I laid down as a watery yellow-green, and that's fine. So I'm just going to go over the latest areas now. Once I mixed, my brush was really, really saturated with paint, so I'm just rubbing off on the paper towel over here so I don't have too much. Okay, so I've gone from yellow-green in the progression, start out, the first one, to the next one, which has a little bit more of the blue in it. I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to go to the third one here. Might just be easier for you guys to just put water into your supply so it just flows for you and it's ready to go. That's my suggestion instead of doing it in the middle here. I'm just adding water right now until it feels like it's flowing and it's not too sticky. I'm wiping my brush off, going back to the paint. And here's where I'm going. I feel like that jump is way too much right now, and that's okay. What I do is I put it down first. I lay down that supply. Then I go back, kind of rub my brush in the middle, get some of that paint off. And then I'll go back to the lighter value that I had. And I'm going to mix on the paper, I'm going to mix the in-between. I'll go to the next lightest, kind of put a little bit down on top of that so it blends a little bit more. And then what I'll do is I'll clean my brush off, and because there's a big jump between that value of green and that value, with a clean brush I can kind of dab and blend them, just like you guys did with the sphere by blending your values together. They're blending a little bit more now. I'll take that darker green I was using, put a little bit more down, blend it. So it's a lot of push and pull. I took a clean brush just now, the previous step, and now I'm taking a little bit more of that darker green value and putting it back on. Now you see that it kind of fuzzes away. That's what you want. Okay, that's what I want. So I'm going to keep going with that value of green a little bit further. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of the next darker value, put that down, like that. When you get to that point, then you can, well, I should probably go a little bit further. Oh no, I have another green, duh, it's right here. It looks blue, it looks really blue on the camera, but it's like it's about here, which also looks blue on the camera, but it's more of a green than a blue. I'm reserving the blue for behind the column. I'm not using the blue quite yet. So dry your brush off. To get a really pointed tip, if you feel like you have too much paint, is to go like this after you've washed your brush a little bit and just get a teeny tiny amount on your brush. You can really kind of control your brush shape. So I'm putting that green value, that darker value down like this until I have there's a teeny tiny amount of space left on those stripes, and those will be the dark Prussian blue, the darkest value that we said we were going to reserve for back here. Okay, I'm going to try to blend a little bit more right here from this green to that green. Those values, there's too big of a jump, so I wash my brush off. It might still be not dry, might be wet still, and I can kind of dab them and push in between and fuzz it. I'm fuzzing it just like you did for the spheres, fuzzing it for the spheres. Okay, that looks a little bit better, right? Comparatively, like right here, it looks like it transitions nicely, and then right here it looks pretty distinctly darker green and then lighter green. If it ever looks like that to you, then fix it by blending the in-between space. Then I'll go down to the next darkest value and kind of blend that in. So I just put that down. Perfect. Now I'm ready for that darkest value blue. So I'll pick some up from my paint blob over here. And since I am only really using a tiny amount at this time, I don't really need to add water into it. I'll just put it down. It's not gonna, it doesn't have to flow very far in those teeny tiny spots. Okay, I've successfully made 2 partial stripes. They're looking pretty good. I feel like these don't blend as nice as they could. So what I'm gonna do is I let them dry, and then I'm gonna take a little bit of water on my brush, and I'll be able to kind of touch down in between them and wiggle back and forth. And that should blend it a little bit better for me. It should fuzz it in. Do you see that? And I'll do this side too. It doesn't require a ton of water. If you use too much water, it kind of picks up way too much paint, and see, it's kind of picked up way too much just then. I used too much water, but that's okay. There we go. All right, I'm satisfied with that. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom in on what I'm painting for right now, so you can see a little bit farther in. And then I'll zoom out in a little bit. So I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to go from here to here. I'm going to stop the video when I need to tell you something important. Soon, okay? I have a little more distance that the lightest yellow green goes in. I went to about here because and then around here because there's more that I see more of this stripe than I do these stripes in space. I'm going to wash my brush and I'm going to blend using a clean brush. I'm going to blend here and here. I'm going to blend the in-between. So if I push some of that darker value green towards the lighter green, they will start blending together just because they're still wet. And also, if this was dry, they'd also blend. Just not as easily as they are right now. I might just let this dry and see if that'll blend a little easier later. taking a clean brush and I'm kind of dabbing in this space. There's a point to which putting more paint on and trying to get it to blend with the next section is hard, so you can just try taking a clean, dry brush and pushing it around like that. That seemed like it worked a little bit better. Now you're getting to the point where you're going to have a curve. This is going to curve around, like you see the full curve. You're going to treat the top of the curve here as the lightest area. Okay. So that same rule applies for down here on the bottom of this curve, all these curves. The lightest spot will be on the curve. These between this spot and this spot, this is going to be a darker value than this spot, but these spots will both be the lighter than what's next to them. So this area will be lighter than over here. So that's what makes the illusion that it's bending, is that at the bend right here, this spot is lighter. This spot is the lightest. Okay? This bend right here, since it's farther back, that's not going to be yellow-green. It's going to be the next darkest value. It has to be. It's farther back. And this one, I mean, this is in between this green and that green, it has to be this green. So what I can do is sort of put it down right now and mix it on the spot. There. So it goes from light, medium to darker. So that was the bend. I need to go darker than that green, and that was this one. So I gotta go to this one, to this value of green, and lay that down next. That's what it looks unblended, okay? So darker value here, lighter value at the bend. This part of the ribbon, I call them ribbons as well, this part of the stripe or ribbon goes back. So this part here is closer to you than this part. So this part needs to be darker than this part. The values need to be darker. So this green can continue, this value of green can continue, but I can't continue that green because it's going to get darker on that side. So I need to add a darker green in right here, and it changes pretty quick. And then I go to the almost darkest value, the blue green. And at the very intersection of this column and then the stripes that go behind, this has to be the darkest blue, which I forgot about at that point. So I'm just going to put the darkest blue in that spot right now. And just to remind myself for later, I'm going to put the darkest blue down, the darkest value. Just so I don't forget. I'll do a couple of them. I still need to blend this green and that green together, these values, so it's still wet, which is fine. So I take a clean brush and I touch down so it does blend. You see that? I'm going to continue on with this stripe right now. So I'm going to keep going with this value of green. And as soon as the stripe gets bigger and wider, it needs to get lighter, because that means it's coming towards me. So I need to stop about right there with that green, and I need to go ahead and grab the lighter green, which is right here. It's not the lightest yet. I need to put that down. Because as I get to the curve here, it needs to be the lightest at the curve. I'm going to blend between these two greens. I'm going to go ahead and blend by fuzzing it a little bit. There we go. I am going to continue up here because you guys can see it. And then I'll shift the paper. So I'm going to work on this one right here. And that's going to do the same thing as this stripe right here. It's going to be this green all the way through there, and then it'll change a little bit as you get to here. We'll talk more about these curves over here in a second. Sometimes you'll just want to mix it in between so you don't have to blend. That's fine. I could have made a ton of different values in my progression. I could have made all of these if I wanted to, at least all of these first ones. So it's easier for me. It's up to you. It's completely up to you. I made 3 less values because I knew they would mix on the canvas. I'm sorry, on the paper. I just mixed an in-between value here of the lighter green and the next darkest green, next darker green. Kind of in between, like on the side of the palette. This is the same green all the way through the center of that column. Because that's the same thickness of that stripe. And then it gets a little bit bigger around here. It's going to get a little bit, since these stripes are closest to me, so it's kind of curved. This is a curved column. It's kind of curving out, right? So this area does need to be a little bit darker than that area, because if this is going to be billowing out and being roundish, I need to make sure that's darker because it's farther back in space. So what I'll probably do is just extend this green value a little bit farther. Like this. And then for the curve, that's going to be this green. This one. So this green exists here. It started about here because this part of the column is coming towards me. So this area is lighter. This stripe is going back into space, this part of the column. So this green needed to be different than that green. It needed to be darker. That one was darker. And then this curve right here, the bottom of the curve, or the ribbon, that's going to be this green. And then this curve right here, that needs to be this green. Because that is closer to us, this curve is closer to us than this curve. That's farther away. So these two curves can't be the same green in value. This has to be a darker value. This one. This one. I'm just laying these down because later it'll be more confusing. I just know that I'm laying that information down, and that's correct. So this green loop is the darkest value here at the loop. Remember we said the little loop, since it's bending, it has the lightest area of that stripe. So that green is darker than this green, and this green is darker than this green. So I used that one for here, right? Yep. And so I use that one, the lightest one, for there. Now I'm going to continue this. I'm going to continue, I just did the curves, and I'm going to go back into space. So I started with this green here. I need to go darker value than that green, which that was this one. So now I got to go to this value, put that down, it also needs to happen right here. Now I blend these two together, and then here it's the darkest value. Actually, no, I have another one. I have this one. I haven't used this one yet. So put that one down first, like that, and then right there is the dark blue. And there it is. I'm going to finish the in-between progression right here. So I had the darkest, and I'm going to go lighter. Darkest value, and I'm going to go lighter. And then lighter. And then lighter. I need to blend these two spaces. I'm going to do that with a clean brush. Kind of fuzz it out a little bit. Alright, let's move it along here. I'm going to go back to fill it. Oh, no, well, doesn't matter which way you go now. I might just finish this one because it's the missing stripe right now. This stripe is a little thinner. I'm going to make it the same green as these two stripes. Same green value. Because what's happening here is that this area of the imaginary column, the crazy room, right here is the same. These stripes should be the same. So I think I went a little too dark right here. As soon as it goes, like it's going in the distance a little bit here. It's receding in the distance here. So that change is happening here, here, and here. So I don't need the change to happen quite yet. So I am just going to go over what I did previously on this stripe and make it the same value green here. Because I want it to start changing around the edges of something that's kind of curved and going in the distance. It would be the edges. If that makes any sense to you. So you might end up making edits as you go, and that's totally fine. Okay, I feel like that's better. For me, it looks better, I think. I might have gone a little too dark right here. I'm just being a stickler for my own work right here. I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter, just right there. Then I'll take a clean brush and kind of rub back and forth. All right. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here. So I have that green down. I'll lay down the next lighter value green next to it. And then as I get into this space, this is dry at this point. So if I put down this value here, it's wet, then I can start blending. So I put that down right now. Oh, my brush is too wet. Make sure your brush is not too wet. So after you wash it, dry it off, and then pick up your paint. Otherwise it's going to mess you up. I'm going to go back to the darker value green and add a little bit more in the wet spot right here, just so it kind of starts to mix a new value of in between value, and so that it blends nicer. There we go. Perfect. Wash dry my brush. And I'm going to go this way. So I'll take that next green value Put it down. Like this. And since this is dry, that's not going to help me out. So I can always add the same value of green on top of what's already there. So I add a little puddle of the lightest value. And what I can do is I can blend together. I should do it with a clean dry brush. So I'm going to clean my brush up, dry it. Now I can push some of that darker green over to the lighter green, and it's going to start blending together and making an in-between value that I did not pre-mix. See? Nice and blended. And I'm going to keep going around the curve on this stripe to where it's dark. I can go the other way if I felt like it. I can go this way. But I might just go this way because this is still wet. So that was that green. Now I'm going to go to this green value. Between this green value and this blue, there are two more I got to get to. So put them in there. Two more values in the progression. There's one. That's the first one. There's the second one in between. I can see the difference right here for sure. This is better blended. So while it's still wet, I can kind of take a clean brush and wiggle a little bit in that seam where they connect. And there you go. Kind of wiggle a little bit here. Kind of blends together. I'm going to go back over here. I need to go darker. I think what I'm doing is too light. So I should be getting darker right here for sure. So I'm going to skip ahead. Lay down a little darker green. Wash my brush, dry it off. Go darker, darker. The supply that you make beforehand is going to start drying in the palette, so just add a little bit more water to it and mix it up to rehydrate it. It should never feel sticky when you're painting with gouache. It should feel like it's creamy and flowy. I'm going to keep going with this green value that I had for over here because it's really not going to start changing to the lightest green until it gets to the curve. So I'm not going to force the change to happen right now. It's just going to be that same green going up that way and off the border, off the paper. These stripes on the sides, I don't see as much information from these stripes than I do these stripes. These stripes are actually closer to me on this side, and how I know that is that they're wider. These are a little wider right here than those. So these ones I'm going to keep the same green value going across, because if I saw more of this stripe, it would get lighter about here. Okay. This is what I'm talking about with the stripes. These stripes are going off in the distance this way. That's where they're going. Now I can see more of this stripe because they're coming towards me. So I see more of them. So I will get lighter than this green over here, starting at this one. So that green, this green continues a little bit farther, and then the lighter green value comes into play. Here it is. I just need to blend them. I can either mix on the paper or wait till it dries to kind of mix. I had too much paint there, so I want to take some paint away. Then I'll go back with that darker value green, add a little bit more on so it looks like it's transitioning a little bit slower and it's blending. And I'll go back and put the lighter green on top. Again, I don't see the lightest value here. I see the lightest value here, but this has been cut off. If this stripe continued, right here is where I would see the lightest value. So all of these stripes do not have the lightest value until you get to here. And this does, because you can see more of it. So I'm going to finish this off by putting down the lightest value that I had, filling it in, and then blending the two spaces together, blending this value and this value together. Oh, I have to do these two as well. All right, there we go. Finished. I feel like I'm missing maybe this little, that information I gotta get in. So I think I'm just gonna add, since this is farther back than these greens, I'm gonna make this little, I don't know, teardrop shape. I'm gonna make that darker than these greens. So it would be this green? Yeah, it'd be this value of green. Ta-da! Let's check it out from a distance. Whoa, crazy. Optical illusion-y. Wow, whoa. And that's because we use tonal progression to create that illusion of space. The darker value of blue, the darkest value, which was the Prussian blue, happens here and kind of at the edges in certain places. And then your next darkest value, which almost looks like the darkest blue-green, happens here. And then it kind of fans outward. Because this space is behind this column, I can't use the darkest value for right here, because this is where the shadow would be. That's farther back. So I didn't use the darkest values here. Okay? And then because these stripes in the swoopy room right here are the closest ones to me because they are wider. They are coming towards me in space. This is farther back. This is closer to me. Because of that, these areas are the lightest on my tonal progression.